Hello, family. There is an old saying that the truth has a funny way of finding daylight. Sometimes it comes through official documents, sometimes it comes through whistleblowers, and sometimes it comes from a random hiker climbing a mountain with a phone in his pocket. Today, we're talking about a story that has many people asking a very simple question. If nobody had recorded that video, would the public ever have known the original story wasn't accurate? Because what happened over the last 24 hours is honestly one of the strangest examples of media backtracking we've seen in quite some time. A newspaper publishes one version of events, a member of the public uploads ordinary footage. Suddenly, the story changes. Not after a lengthy investigation, not after new evidence suddenly appears from nowhere, but after a random hiker unknowingly films something that completely changes the narrative. And that's where things become incredibly interesting. Let's get into it. The British media has spent years lecturing everyone else about misinformation. They constantly remind us about fake news. They tell us context matters. They insist facts are sacred. Fantastic. Those are wonderful principles. The only tiny inconvenience is that they should probably apply those standards to themselves, because this latest episode raises serious questions about how royal stories are packaged before they're delivered to the public. Initially, the Daily Mail promoted the story that Catherine completed the challenge alone, with her family supposedly meeting her at the base of the final stop. That wording matters. It creates a particular image. It paints the picture of a lone, determined future queen pushing herself through one of Britain's toughest endurance challenges before finally being reunited with family afterwards. It's the kind of headline designed to inspire admiration. Strong, independent, resilient. Mission accomplished. Except then reality showed up, and reality was carrying an iPhone. A hiker named Philip Tebajwa happened to be on Snowdon. He wasn't working for a newspaper, he wasn't hired by Kensington Palace, he wasn't filming a documentary. He was simply hiking. Imagine that! People climbing mountains instead of chasing royal headlines. How refreshingly normal. During his hike, he unknowingly captured footage showing Catherine descending alongside her brother, James Middleton, not waiting at the bottom, not arriving after the challenge, actually with her during the descent, holding hands at one point. Now, let's be absolutely fair. There is absolutely nothing wrong with accepting support from your brother while descending a mountain. Most people would probably appreciate a helping hand. Mountains can be dangerous. Nobody should criticize someone for being careful. That isn't the issue. The issue is the story that had already been sold to the public, because almost immediately the reporting changed. The same publication that had described Catherine as completing the challenge alone now acknowledged James Middleton's role during the descent. Think about that for a second. The mountain didn't change. James Middleton didn't suddenly appear through a portal. The only thing that changed was the existence of public footage. And that's why people are asking uncomfortable questions. If the hiker had never uploaded that clip, would the original version still be circulating today? Would millions of readers still believe Catherine completed that section entirely on her own?
Nobody can answer that with certainty, but it's a reasonable question because the correction only came after independent evidence emerged. That's simply the timeline, and timelines matter. This also demonstrates something. The palace no longer has complete control over the narrative. Neither does the royal rota, neither do newspapers. Every tourist has a smartphone. Every walker has a camera. Every cyclist can accidentally become an eyewitness. The days when carefully crafted stories could travel unchallenged are disappearing. Reality now has thousands of cameras, and that's probably one of the healthiest developments in modern journalism. What makes this even more fascinating is what happened next. Philip later apologized for sharing the footage. He also stated that ownership of the video had been transferred to Kensington Palace following media interest. Now, let's be crystal clear. We do not know why he apologized. We do not know whether anyone requested it. We do not know the discussions that took place privately. Speculation isn't evidence. But the sequence of events has naturally sparked debate online. People are asking why someone would apologize for sharing ordinary footage filmed in a public place. Others are wondering why ownership of the footage ended up with Kensington Palace. Those are legitimate questions. They're not accusations, they're questions. And there's a difference. Here's something else worth discussing. Notice how different the media's energy becomes depending on which royal they're covering. Imagine, just for a moment, that something similar had happened involving Harry and Meghan. Imagine a newspaper claimed Harry completed a major endurance event entirely alone. 24 hours later, independent footage emerged showing someone had been assisting him throughout part of it. Can anyone honestly say the headlines would quietly be adjusted and everyone would simply move on? Not a chance. The commentators would be having a field day. They'd call it manufactured PR. They'd question authenticity. They'd accuse the Sussexes of staging narratives. Panels would be assembled. Columns would be written. Television debates would stretch for days. The double standard would practically write itself. Yet, when it's Catherine, many outlets suddenly become remarkably forgiving. Interesting how consistency sometimes goes missing faster than signal on a mountain. This isn't about attacking Catherine personally, it's about accountability. If newspapers expect readers to trust them, accuracy has to come first. If a headline creates an impression that later proves incomplete, readers deserve to know why. Corrections aren't shameful. Pretending they aren't necessary is. Some defenders are already saying, well, James only helped during the descent. Fine, perhaps that's true. But then why wasn't that explained from the beginning? Why frame the story in a way that implied she was alone until reaching the bottom? Words matter, headlines matter, public perception matters. Media organizations know this better than anyone. That's precisely why headlines are carefully crafted. This episode also reveals something bigger. Royal public relations has always relied heavily on symbolism. Photographs aren't just photographs, they're messages. Walking alone sends one message, walking with family sends another. Completing a challenge independently projects one image, completing it with visible support projects another. Neither image is inherently good or bad, they're simply different, which is exactly why accuracy matters. One random hiker ended up performing a public service without even realizing it. He reminded everyone that independent footage can provide valuable context, not because it creates scandal, but because it fills in missing pieces. Citizen journalism has become one of the most powerful accountability tools in modern society. Sometimes the biggest stories aren't uncovered by investigative reporters. They're uncovered by ordinary people who simply happen to be in the right place at the right time. Ironically, this entire controversy could have been avoided. Imagine if the palace had simply said, Catherine completed the challenge with support from family members, including her brother during part of the descent. Nobody would have cared. Most people would have thought, that's lovely. Instead, a narrative was presented that appears to have required revision after independent evidence emerged. That's what created the controversy. Not the hike itself, the messaging. And perhaps that's the biggest lesson here. Trust isn't lost through honest mistakes. Trust is lost when people feel they're being sold an image instead of being told the straightforward truth. The public is remarkably forgiving when organizations simply admit an error. What they don't appreciate is discovering the full story only because someone outside the official system happened to upload a video. This story also highlights how much the media landscape has changed. 20 years ago, that footage might never have reached the public. Today, millions can watch it within hours. That's a fundamental shift in power. News organizations are no longer the gatekeepers. Palaces are no longer the storytellers. Ordinary people now contribute to the historical record, whether institutions like it or not.
The public isn't asking for perfection. They're asking for honesty. And in an age where everyone has a camera, honesty is no longer just the best policy, it's the only policy that has any chance of surviving. Because mountains don't care about press releases, phones don't care about carefully crafted headlines, and sometimes the most powerful fact checker isn't a newsroom, it's a random hiker who unknowingly pressed record. And here's what really stands out to me. This wasn't an investigative journalist exposing a hidden secret. It wasn't a rival newspaper breaking an exclusive. It wasn't even someone deliberately trying to challenge the official narrative. It was an ordinary member of the public enjoying a hike who happened to record a few seconds of video. That should make every newsroom stop and think. When a casual smartphone clip forces a major publication to adjust its reporting, it suggests the original story wasn't nearly as thoroughly checked as readers would expect. If citizen footage can change the headline in less than a day, perhaps the headline shouldn't have been written with such certainty in the first place. There's also a bigger conversation here about modern royal coverage. Too often, some sections of the press seem more interested in crafting a heroic image than simply describing events as they happened. The truth is compelling enough on its own. Completing a demanding mountain challenge is impressive, whether someone does it entirely alone or with encouragement from a sibling. Nobody needed an embellished version to appreciate the effort. But once storytelling starts taking priority over straightforward reporting, credibility begins to erode. And credibility, unlike a mountain trail, is much harder to climb back once you've slipped. Perhaps the greatest irony of this entire episode is that the palace and sections of the media have spent years trying to portray social media as the source of misinformation. Yet in this case, it was social media that provided the missing context. A random hiker uploaded unfiltered footage, people compared it with the published reports, and suddenly a different picture emerged. That's a fascinating reversal. It reminds us that transparency doesn't always come from official channels. Sometimes it comes from ordinary people who have no agenda beyond sharing what they happened to witness. In the digital age, every member of the public has the potential to become an independent fact-checker, and that's changing the relationship between powerful institutions, the media, and the audience forever.